Cole, why don't we start down there?
Cole, quick, just put it on.
Chuck Walensky, Chuck.
Scott Hatcher, First Responders.
Paul Kessler, AMR.
Nicholas Prentice, paramedic.
Jeff Warner, CalStar.
Christy Soboleski, Chuck.
Jared Bagwell, EMS Agency.
In the back?
Theodore Allen from AMR, Monterey.
Mike Escalter, AMR.
I'm Eric O'Brien, Monterey County Regional Fire.
John Greathouse, Public Health.
Silas Fisher, Monterey Fire.
Devin Haig, Portland Fire.
Roxanne Six,
For those who are better, Roxanne's a new epidemiologist, and I'm Laura Wallen, EMS Agency.
Steve Brooks, EMS Agency. Fred Claridge, EMS Agency.
Teresa Rios, EMS Agency. Susan Bledge from County Council.
Okay. Jim Schofield, EMS Agency. I guess it's still have command voice.
Yeah, you do.
That's good. That's a good thing. Why don't we open the floor for public comment? Yeah.
Go ahead.
Go first.
So for those who don't know, I just wanted to acknowledge Paul Castellari. Paul has actually accepted a position as a field supervisor. So we are in the process of making offers. We're actually hiring 2 people to fill Paul's role. So I think that's a great testament to the great work that Paul's been doing. So I'm not sure this will be his last meeting or not, but I thought I would put it out there that Paul's done a great job, and we certainly appreciate everything he's done over the past year.
Thanks, Paul.
I'd just like to recognize firefighter Christopher Fisk, who's a Monterey firefighter who passed away last week in an off-duty accident. So 12 years with Monterey Fire.
Anyone else? Okay. I'd like to hear a motion at any time to approve the minutes from March. Amend and approve. Don't tell me you just read the day.
I looked at them last night, but I'm still processing them today.
I don't believe that. Eric, did I see a hand going?
No.
Oh, no.
That was a twitch.
Oh, twitch. You do realize that this is a chance for you to amend and approve. I can just go ahead and keep going.
That's what happened last time, is they were not,
It just,
they did not, there was no motion, or it wasn't voted on, so that's why March is on here as well. So
Since we didn't have a quorum.
we do now.
Yeah.
So, I don't know what's gonna happen with you guys when you get really old. I got all day. I don't think I'm supposed to take all day. I hear a motion. Oh, thank you.
I think the minutes are lovely.
Can I get a second on those lovely minutes? They're minutes, they're not something we have to really
I'll second
discuss.
it. I just found them. I forgot to look at the March ones, sorry. I looked at the May ones. I'm good.
Okay.
Let's start.
Unless there's further discussion, I will consider those approved.
And I'll just motion the May ones now if you want. Those I read. I can motion the May ones now if you want. I read those.
Well, I was gonna go down to the main ones. I'd like to have a motion for the minutes from May. You wanna vote for it? We'll vote for it. Susan wants us to vote. Okay, can I hear a vote for March minutes? All in favor? So one little finger go up, it wasn't the.
Of approving?
No, the D finger.
Just approving.
For March, yeah. For March. Okay. Are there any nays? Let's get this out of the way. So, And C, approval of the May 8, 2019 meeting minutes. I think Dr. Polinski made a motion.
I already did.
Yes, ma'am.
Save you some
Do
time.
we have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, sir.
Thanks, Scott. Thanks for that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Any nays? So. Okay, I don't think I need to read item D, it says everything that's necessary right there. EMS recognition, none today. Request for nominations, you should give those to Steve, and I'm sure my successor, I will talk to about that, because I think it's very important we continue to recognize what folks do right there where the rubber meets the road, locally, on the ground, and on some sort of routine basis when you get back to government. Oral communication, any member of the public may address the committee for a period not to exceed 3 minutes. On any issue not on the committee's agenda, the committee will listen to all communication and may not take any action. Floor is open. Sign through today. Correspondence, none. Old business. Steve, would you like to take A?
I can do that. All of you should have received the staff report along with the meeting agenda, minutes, and all of that. We are starting now, essentially, the next policy cycle, and we'll be distributing the new and revised policies, I believe, tomorrow afternoon, and we'll be having a kind of pushed forward policy cycle. So it will be ending on January 2nd rather than, and becoming effective January 2nd rather than a July 1 start date. And this will be replacing, the usual policy cycle that would have a July 1 start date. We do not have a large number of policies and protocols this time, which I'm sure everybody will be grateful for. On the staff report, we'll see most of the policies and protocols that we have moving forward. So you'll be getting those emailed tomorrow, and we'll start taking, that'll open the public comment period. Any questions, comments? Yes, sir.
So we're not going to see another cycle come out for July 1? This is it?
This is the cycle. There will be the 3 months for training, October, November, December. So everything will be completed by the end of September for public comment period, which will open tomorrow and go through August 16th. And we'll be bringing our, the EMS agency response and cleanup and all of that to the September 11th MAC and OPS, and we'll release for final, for training purposes, the final drafts, or the final policies on October 1st.
So when all the public comment comes in, will we be able to see those comments before we come to the meeting in September so we can process them
Yes, they'll go out with the meeting materials.
with the packets?
And honestly, I'll see if we can push that forward at least a couple days, give you a couple more days.
I know one of the things we've missed is we've gone so many policies so quickly. We've eliminated meaningful discussions we've had here to really impart the stakeholder input. We want to make sure that that's not overlooked.
We'll definitely be, again, they'll be released for public comment, and we'll accept comments, and we will look at all the comments at the meeting, and we'll give you time to review all the comments as well as the agency response to the comments, so that at the meeting we can hammer out, whatever needs to be, timely dealt with. And unfortunately, again, as I say, there's not a lot of them. They're big ones, they're important ones, just not a lot.
Anything else on this, Steve?
No, that's
Okay.
it.
Jared, Pete?
Just an update on the communication policies. They were 3010, 3030, and 3050 were sent out at the end of May with an effective date of September 1st. on that.
Okay.
Okay. So with the EPCR data system, Monterey County Regional Fire is now in our countywide system, and I think that gives us a really solid countywide system now where we have everybody's data from a field perspective. And we have been as you know, we have been working with the county HIE, Central Coast Health Connect it's called, to try to integrate our EPCR data system into their HIE, and we had done quite a bit of work with them actually. We had a lot of meetings where we were exchanging technical information and all that sort of thing, and then on May 30th, I think it was, they sent us an email that said their leadership met, decided they did not want to integrate our system with their system. So now we're back to the original plan, which was health data exchange with all 4 hospitals. We're scheduling a meeting with their leadership again to let them know that this is what we're interested in pursuing so that we can get outcome data back to our ESO system. I was a little disappointed, quite frankly. We put a lot of time and effort into working with the HIE, but it really is up to them as to whether or not they want to join with us. So we'll go a different route. And in May, we had ESO here for in-county training. We had them meet with the EMS agency staff in the morning, and then we had a stakeholder meeting, the EPCR data work group meeting in the afternoon. We had about 15 people, I think, from the various provider agencies out there, and I think it was really helpful to have somebody from ESO actually here in town to help us work through some of the things that we're dealing with. The next goal for me is going to be to do a training probably in August on good documentation, and I'll provide more information to everybody as I finalize those plans. Does anybody have any questions?
Yeah, for the HDE, I'm pretty excited that we're moving forward with that part. You know, the HIE stakeholders we talked to don't seem to get a whole lot of feedback from as far as outcomes. So is there a proposed timeline? I mean, we looked at HDE for a couple of years now. I mean, is there some idea we can put in the next?
Yeah. You know, honestly, I can't give you an exact date. It's been a slower process than I would have liked, honestly. I'm told from ESO's perspective that with all of the systems that our hospitals have, their electronic health record system, that the technical part of it is easy. It's going to be getting the agreement with the various hospitals to join with us and share that data with us. So we're going back to the drawing board, so to speak, and I hope we can get it done as soon as possible, but I couldn't give you an exact date, to be honest with you.
Well, thanks for putting on the workshop. I think those would be a great annual function to actually
Absolutely.
bring everybody to the table and talk about data. Us data nerds get excited.
And we have a good system now. Any other questions or comments?
Thanks, Rick. Go ahead with your business.
First responder response times. We had talked about this before. We did finally get a new epidemiologist for the health department in EMS agency, Roxanne. I'll be technically introducing her later, but it'd be awkward to not do it now. She's going to help validate the information to make sure that everything is good to go. We haven't done that before, but we're trying to benchmark just how the system currently works in the different areas of the county as a system approach. So we expect perhaps by the next meeting we should be able to have something available. But when the information is finalized, we'll send it out to fire departments to review and discuss.
So this is broken down into districts and response areas, not an aggregate of the entire system?
Yeah, exactly. And compare ambulance responses in those districts, et cetera. So kind of trying to see how all the pieces work together as a system.
You want to do these?
Mobile app? Oh, just a quick update. The mobile app was updated in iOS and Android. It was checked and validated, so all the new policies as of September 1 should be available on there. So take a look at it. Any questions or concerns, let us know. I'm sorry, July 1.
Jared, can I ask a question? Is there any way of enhancing the searchability? Or like, if you enter determination of death on the main screen, it doesn't bring up the policy for us to rapidly use it. And since we don't use your policies regularly, we don't necessarily know the numbers. So when they make face contact, it's not really functional for us.
Yeah.
And it's not searchable.
We can engage the vendor.
That would be
See what we can
awesome.
do. Yeah. We'll put that on our list of things to do.
And who should we contact for updates? There's a couple of errors.
You can start with me, and I'll work with Stephanie and the vendor.
Laura, I think 7 is mostly you. You want to give an update?
Okay, so on CQI, I should have made a report at the last MAC meeting for the May 9th CQI tag meeting. I'll do that now. The EMS agency started presenting very preliminary data on endotracheal intubation at that meeting. It was not validated. It was very, very preliminary. And we were tasked with going back and refining and validating the data. As far as QI plan updates, all ALS providers and base hospitals that have QI plan updates do have submitted updates that meet the state requirements. When you submit data, though, it is very, very important that you validate and ensure that the data you are submitting is correct. After rechecking the data submitted by the ALS providers, Monterey County Regional was the only group that submitted accurate data. So we went back and we're revalidating the data on endotracheal intubations. I presented this at the June 20th meeting, which we called as an emergency meeting because the data we were finding was somewhat alarming. So I put together, I worked with our epidemiologist to put some data together. This is different looking than what was shown at the CQI tag on June 20th because we have done a final deep dig. And what we found is that overall, 62, in 2018, that's the orange lines, we were at 62.32% success on the endotracheal intubation. This is not number of attempts, there were, what does it say, 138 patients, and that's how many actually got successfully intubated. In 2019, that went up to 66.67, but this was full year 2018. 2019 was just through June 6th. We have it broken out by provider as well. You have the number of intubations on the bottom of the bars and the percent of success at the top. So things like Carmel and Cal Fire, they only had 4 intubations, so they got 3 of them, but percentages can be misleading when you're talking small numbers. Monterey County Regional, they have had 4 this year. They've gotten every one of them. They had 12 last year. I believe they missed 1. Salinas Fire's at 75% for this year, down at 51% for last year. So as a result of these data, which this is showing a bit better than what we had at the June 20th meeting, we have mandated that all ALS providers do training on endotracheal intubation by September 30th. We developed a performance standard, which is a very, very detailed. Before the paramedic intubates, they must do this. While intubating, here's what you do. After intubating, it has core curriculum, it has textbooks, references, resources, and skill sheets on it. So this ensures that everybody in the county is training exactly the same way on the same procedures. And everybody has been very receptive to this training. The other thing that we brought up, and this got brought up to me a couple of days before the meeting, was the trauma assessments. And we discussed this at the meeting. There were a couple of open book pelvic fractures that were missed. And on one of them, they said there was no abnormalities, and on the other, they said not assessed. And that was like auto-ped on a 70-year-old lady. So we developed a performance standard on trauma assessments. Because we do not have we have all the data to validate that this is across the board not being done, we are highly encouraging training on trauma assessments using that performance standard. we will be doing a bit more of a dive into that to validate whether this is in fact happening.
Can I ask a question about the intubation
Oh,
stuff?
sure, yeah.
Do you have benchmarks for what other EMS agencies' success rates are? Because I think like in hospital, first pass success rate, even in the ER, like when you have a controlled environment, it's like 90%. So it's not super high.
Right, and thank you for asking that. The way I got the 85% is I did research on, here, let me pull it back up so we can see it. Where are we? Slideshow, correct slide. The 85% success rate benchmark was set as a result of research. I reviewed 8 peer-reviewed research articles and a position paper by the National Association of EMS Physicians. The range in those articles was from 80.2 up to 90.1. So we set 85 as kind of across the board there. And this was not kind of goals, this was what was actually being accomplished in these studies. And one of the studies was a meta-analysis of 28 previous studies. So it included a lot of data to get to that 85% benchmark. Yes?
What I was hearing is this pre-hospital benchmarks, or is this hospital benchmarks?
Pre-hospital.
So
There's a couple of things.
Well, no, in the hospital.
Yeah, in the hospital.
Yeah, so that's why I'm saying
Yeah.
I think 85. See, I mean,
I'll give an
it'd
example.
be a nice
of
thing
what
to reach
was.
for, but it seems actually pretty high if we have other options for nurses.
Well, Laura and I, we beat this up. We don't necessarily totally agree on how to go about this. I think there's where we want Monterey to be. I think there's, because I know at Impact, we looked at this several ways in terms of what that number means in a pre-hospital environment. One of the things that I've looked at, and Laura's done a lot of research, and I think we have to give her credit for that, but I looked at the annual report out of Santa Clara, that was 2016, and their average was 72%, okay? So the other thing is, and Dr. Cliff mentioned it because I think that's going to be very important going forward, and that is what are those benchmarks around us, what's happening north and south of us, and what does that mean in a pre-hospital environment. The other thing too is when we say intubation, endotracheal intubation. Now in California we have to define that. We had a lot of fights about that in fact. What's an attempt? Okay, because I got to tell you, and anybody who's worked with me before I intubate somebody, I take a look down there, and I want to see what it is I'm getting ready to do, and can we bag them, and so on and so on. There were some medical directors at the time that felt that just looking was an attempt, but we kind of came to agreement that an ET tube in your hand is the smoking gun. Okay, that you know, once that gets to the teeth, that's an attempt. But the thing is, how many anesthesiologists in the hospital right now are using LMAs? And the supraglottic airway is there, and I think that's the next step that we got to look at, and we have to also look at exactly once we're there. And king tube's still considered SGA, but once we're there, what does that success rate mean? So did they try twice and fail? Or did they try once and say, okay, I'm going straight to a supraglottic airway? And so I think that what will happen in the analysis is several things. Number one, people are going to do better because it's just that, what do they call it, the Hawthorne effect. Once you're looking, things get better, okay? We want it better. I mean, we want whatever happens out there to be what happens if it's, you know, our family members. But there's an analysis piece here to figure out what exactly those numbers mean and what's going on around us.
I think that's right. And I mean, I think we want all the medics' innovation skills to be as good as possible and their success rate to be as high as possible. But also, I mean, all the patients just need a functional airway to get them from the scene to the hospital. And it might be an endotracheal tube. It might be something else if the endotracheal tube is difficult to pass or there's something else. I think that's the other thing that needs to be looked at too, is just to successful airway without complications, whether that's an endotracheal tube or if that doesn't work, a king tube or a combi tube or whatever else is in the rig.
I'm glad you brought that up because,
I'm sorry, got it.
I'm sorry, I'm glad you did bring that up because this is not people who didn't get an airway. They got an airway, whether it was BLS, king tube, or ET tube. This is a measure of confidence in an infrequently used critical skill.
And then, there's been very large recent NICE pre-hospital airway studies. And I think that we need to look at the fact that when, you're right, it's not really 85-90%, it's literally 70 to 75%. And that's why most of them are recognizing that this is incredibly difficult when you guys do it. I mean, we end up at 90%, it's really hard doing this laying down in the middle of a hallway. And those studies are leaning more towards using alternative airway types because the outcomes are actually better when you guys aren't struggling to do this. And I think as part of the training, honestly, going in a stepwise approach and recognizing if you have a good BLS airway or if you can rapidly place the king or another supraglottic alternative, may be better in the long-term resuscitation of these cases. And there may be only a select group that needs a true endotracheal intubation for a successful resuscitation.
And that was brought up at the meeting and will be on the agenda for the next CQI.
I have another concern, and this comes up with the recent airway issue, is the policy I think needs to be extremely clear that if there isn't an entitled CO2 verifying an endotracheal intubation, that tube should not be used.
And
The current policy is not completely clear that
says
you
it's
cannot
mandatory.
use it.
The current policy says
So
it
it's
is mandatory.
mandatory, but it doesn't say that it has to be positive to utilize the tube. It says it's mandatory to check it, but it doesn't say do not use the endotracheal tube if you do not have an entitled CO2 that's normal or positive or, present.
Okay,
So if you can clarify that there was an endotracheal tube used without a positive entitled CO2, so I think we need to be very clear that the tube should not be used.
I think the QI 1157 part of that particular case, because I looked at that, and I don't know how you two feel about electronic records, but we got Cerner down there in King City now, and I find myself spending more time reading to make sure that what I said was a was, it doesn't go in as a wasn't or whatever. And there are also automatic things that come in when the medic's put in their PCR. So like if they don't comment in certain areas, it comes out as a, like not reviewed or not looked at. And I do think that, I saw conflicting reports between medic and doc as far as, oh no, the CO2 was fine. No, the CO2 wasn't fine. And I think you're exactly right. We should look at that policy and make sure it's really clear that at the handoff that the CO2 is good. Okay, you don't want to find that out a minute later or those sort of things. I mean, you're right.
Well, I think just the standard needs to be, and I don't want to really talk about specific cases, but
Right.
if we haven't verified a field endotracheal tube with entitled CO2, because your risk of missing and malplacement is so much higher in that setting, then we should just not utilize that tube, would be my
Right.
only request.
Right.
And, it's a situation where there are cases in cardiac arrest where you don't have good entitled CO2. We all recognize that, but most of us wouldn't use that tube. We would go back to a BLS airway and kind of resuscitate in other ways and, making sure that thing's in the right spot, which is really hard to do in a pre-hospital setting.
Right.
So just pull the tube and use an alternate airway if you don't have an entitled verification, because it's pretty rare not to have it. It does happen, but percentage-wise, you're playing a game you don't want to play.
Yeah.
Chief Fulcher, you had a comment.
Yeah, I'm comment on that one right there. Would that mean that if we did that that would be a miss?
If you do.
If we pulled,
If you do what,
if
Dave?
we didn't have the entitle, we pulled two, use another airway, would that be a failure?
That'd be a fail too.
Just because, so, I'm gonna go back to, I like the fact that we should be striving for 100%, no matter what we do. But when you give us these numbers and you say that everybody else around us is at 75, 72, and you make our folks go back and go, you're really not confident enough because you're hitting 85 or less than 85, I think it's just that it's not accurate. Our guys and gals in the field are presented with many different scenarios. And those scenarios are not clean, they're not sterile, and they're not, definitely not a hospital setting. But when you imply that our medics aren't competent, they need to go back and review because they missed out in the field one time out of 4 in a special circumstance. I think we're just being disingenuous to our paramedics and putting a label on them that really isn't necessary.
Well, that might be the disingenuous part might be a little harsh. In fact, I think a better way to look at this is a start point. You identify something, you don't hang anybody out to dry, and you figure out, okay, how should we really look at this now? Laura spent a lot of time doing an analysis looking at current literature as far as innovation and innovation success rates. I think that's going to be, a different X and Y axis as far as pre-hospital and what's actually going on with medics right now, and then also putting the data in there, putting the analysis piece in there to see what's going on, say, north and south of us and in California, and what exactly we're looking at. Because, I thought it was a really good annual report, but that was 2016, and that was Santa Clara, and that number was lower. But the other thing that's going to go into this, and that's just a quirky part of my personality, I think it'll be fun to kind of look at where we're headed if we're not necessarily doing intratracheal innovation every time. Maybe we go down on that. Okay, maybe that number is 30% because 70% of the time we do whatever. But it's a start point, Chief, to say, okay, we're looking at this. Nobody's yanking ET tubes off the rigs. Nobody's taking a medic and saying, hey, look, you can't innovate. But it needs to be looked at, okay?
So I agree with you. I like the starting point. Your starting point's too high.
The
That's all.
85%, but the 85%, as I said, is based on actuals. This is not just goals, or it's not hospital. These articles were all pre-hospital, and it was what the actuals were that they were finding in the averages.
Can we have copies of those articles if you wish to?
Yeah, I'm happy to share them.
Were those articles, were they using the same equipment that we're using? And what I mean is, were they using the video innovation, where they have a little video screen, or are they using the traditional stuff that we have?
I can't tell you that. That one I don't know.
I think that would actually be crucial to know,
Yeah.
because it is extremely different. And if you find that your success rates are far less and you're not utilizing the most up-to-date equipment, then perhaps what we need to do is refocus our efforts to get them to the equipment they need for success.
Correct me if I'm wrong, regional went all video, and your statistics are incredible.
I mean, there's a place for both. There's times where your video is not going to work, so you need to know both. But I think if you're working with different equipment, I know 90% of the time I'm going for a video laryngoscope.
I also like to know, was that in the back of the ambulance or on a beach?
Okay.
Yeah, but I think I'm saying the same thing that you're saying, is I think that that you strive for as high as you can get. You strive for, a successful airway, but I think that 85% seems awfully high for a pre-hospital environment, just because in the hospital, in like perfect conditions or near perfect conditions with multiple pieces of equipment and other people to help you and everything else, our first pass success rate is probably around 90%. So I think if you're getting to, I think if you're getting to 75% in the pre-hospital environment, we can always strive to do better, but that's, I think, a pretty good job as far as your innovation skills. But you just need to have a good functioning algorithm. So if you take that first look and you don't have success, then before another complication happens, you can put in some other type of a airway or a BLS airway that the patient needs.
This may be something for Roxanne to dig into, or for us to dig into later, but incredible shift from intubation attempts between 18 and 19. If you look at AMR, we're more than halfway through the year, and 17 attempts. That seems super low.
It's 17 patients.
17 patients?
Yeah, let me.
And then if you look at this.
That was through Gen 6, and I did write down, let's see, AMR had 17 patients, 18 attempts, 9 first pass successful, 0 second pass, and third pass. So they got 9 and missed 8.
So either paramedics are avoiding intubation, I mean, look at the difference between 18 and 19 on your N number.
Well, but 18 is a full calendar year.
Correct.
And
So-
also the paramedics are a lot more likely
So
to
just
use an element.
double 19's number,
Yeah.
let's say it's 84, you're still dramatically below. I mean, all I'm saying is, that's a significant statistical deviation, and what's behind that?
Yes. What I'm seeing is that paramedics are more and more likely to go to the K2 as opposed to trying an ET2, which is fine, get an airway, that's the baby out there. When you speak about a 75%, I look at Carmel and Cal Fire, yes, 75% is pretty good. But it's only 4 patients in each of those as well. So looking at the county overall, we were at 62% last year, we're at 66.7% this year. And training, I think, is a good idea. In the meantime, we are going to be looking more at different supraglottic airways. This has been put on the agenda for the next CQI tag in August, I believe. So we'll be looking at that as
On Chief Fulcher's point, outside of just putting the number out there that says it's just a number that we're looking at, if we go in the next year to review this and we're still not at 85%, then we present that data to an outside agency, outside the county or the state, and they say, well, you haven't met your benchmarks over and over again because we can't get to 85%. So if we set the benchmark too high for ourselves, then we just frankly look bad each year if we're not meeting it. Am I right? Or,
well, what I'm going to do is take a look at, I'm going to remeasure this, all these in January. That's 3 months after the end date for the training, and see where we are then. And we may, between that and comparing more to the California and the area benchmarks, we may adjust that benchmark. Like Dr. Stubblefield said, this is a starting based on the studies that I was reading.
Can we also get the number of non-ET2s or whatever else we're doing? If you said that we're numbers are showing that we're doing fewer innovations, well, shouldn't that show that if we're consistent that we should have a number elevated, a rising number of other alternative means?
Yes, this one was a very, very focused study just on this one skill, and as I said, this is not an indication that the unsuccessful
This
ones.
is very correct. Are people medics intentionally not doing this because they don't want to look bad?
It's a
Because they
bigger-
feel they're not going to make this? I'm just curious.
Well, Dave, I think it's a bigger study now. I don't want to see us as a group right now focus too much on looking at the chart and saying, oh my God, because I don't see it that way. I see it as really what quality improvement is. Hey, we ought to look at that and do it better. I mean, as a guy who used to fly, it's like, okay, let's do another check ride, not, take the wings. It's not that kind of thing. So, yeah, I mean, that's another piece. Are we doing as many innovations? Well, I tell you right now, there's a lot of procedures as emergency physicians we used to do, we don't necessarily do. There's more field pronouncements, so there's things that don't even get to the hospital. You don't have to look at the most recent critical care educational material. You can just go to the old basic ACLS and you can see that there's tons of things where it's like, we could ventilate, so we didn't have to innovate. And, there's more of a focus that way. So there are less procedures, and then that question, which is a separate analysis again, is it significant, or is that where we should be?
That's good. I just want the old saying, there's lies, dim lies, and statistics. Statistics are what you make it, and there's always a variable out there that we're not looking at. And that's all I'm trying to get to is, can we figure out what the true issue is? We're going to put the number up. What's the cause and effect?
Put up failed airways, or you put successful airways. We
Right.
look at things in addition to just triggers of innovation. I think that makes sense, because that's the ultimate goal, is that somebody's got a successful airway.
Right.
I think, so now that you have the prelim, what would be really nice is most of these large airway studies, and there's some big ones out there with percentages that are far below what you're talking about. I mean, the National Airway Study, which think they analyzed like 38,000, was 77%.
That's like Airways 1 and Airways 2 study.
I mean, that's the annals one from that I just pulled up. I mean, there's a whole bunch of them that are in the 70s. So, you know, as you're looking at benchmarking, all of those also look at in-success rates. And the fact that if you take a quick look and you're not passing that ET tube and it's in your hand, you may abort quickly. I mean, good people abort quickly and say, you know what, I'm not gonna get this fast, let me have that king. So pulling in your king data, and what is your true success rate? What is the time that it took to get your airway? You know, how long did they spend on these are all critical questions, because if they look and in 10 seconds or 15 seconds say, sheesh, there's way too much crud in here, I'm gonna take a different pathway, that's actually a good thing, right? Because then they're not diverted onto that task attempting for prolonged periods. And I think that's really the information you're gonna need to know. for
Right.
how
This
successful
is the first really countywide QI study that we've done. And we had decided on several metrics in 2018, which we were unable to get to because we didn't have a unified data system. So I was able to get them to start in 2019, and one of them was endotracheal tube success rates. And as I said, this is not a measure of the airways, it's a measure of a skill. So I agree with the end of the line is we need to know, are they getting an adequate airway?
And on a different note, pelvic binders and trauma, okay? I mean, I just did my ATLS research up at Davis, and you know, it's a funny thing. Every time I do that, after all these years, it's like, oh yeah, pelvic binder, pelvic binder. But it's right there. It's right at the end of that primary assessment. It's supposed to be high up on the list. If you think it's there, put that thing on. And I've kept it simple. I mean, it can be a sheet. It doesn't have to be some expensive, you know, $200, $300, $400 device. But thinking about that, and I think that that is a training issue. I mean, it's PhDLS, it's ATLS, it's out there. You folks know it, but I think making sure that you train up on that if you have a suspicion that you do that. Okay? It's something that we all can forget. But the only people that are going to really make a big difference, I think, as far as that patient getting to the trauma center, are you folks out in the field. In an ED, we start stripping things off and putting in lines. Okay. If you worked on the trauma team, it's a trauma activation, you get other folks in there. But the blood that can be lost out in the field can be really diminished if you get a pelvic binder on. That's just a sheet. It's just a sheet. Tight, and get going. So, anything else on the on 7?
Yeah, I can segue into T-QUIC, and I also have stroke and STEMI. So on T-QUIC, we met on May 9th. I rewrote prior to this, we had, for our protocols for trauma, we had burn, we had isolated extremity, and we had crush injury. I came up, developed a policy for the major trauma patient, which includes the crush and the isolated extremity. It also includes chest, pelvis, head, and it talks about all these different anatomical areas where injuries occur and basic treatment on these. It does include pelvic binders for a suspected pelvic fracture. It tells how to tighten the sheet, how to know when it's too much or not enough. This and policy on, or protocol on traumatic cardiac arrest were put out to TQuIC in May for comment prior to putting it out to the regular group. I did receive some comment, added that to it, and these policies will be going out tomorrow with the group of policies there. We will also be looking more closely, rather than the routine metrics that we've been reporting, we're going to be looking more closely at focused metrics. And in the report, the staff report here, it lists some of the metrics that were suggested at TQuIC. And then I also reported on data sharing among the LEMSAs in the state. I put out a query to all of the LEMSAs, to 24 of the LEMSAs actually, that have a trauma center within their region, asking, are EMS providers included in your trauma audit committee, and what data are you sharing? And the answers I got were all over the board. Some of them talked a lot about all these other committees where trauma issues are shared, but largely EMS providers are not involved in the trauma audit committees and are not privy to the actual data that is shared there. The issues that are identified there, the larger issues, are generally brought to the paramedic committees. In this county, we participate in Santa Clara County's trauma audit committee. There is pre-hospital provider input at that meeting. But basically, there is no standardization throughout the state. Any questions on trauma and TQA?
For the trauma stuff, there's a lot of good places for improvement, but we've desperately been asking for outcomes for discharges, admissions, referrals. We get 2,600 trauma patients a year. Here are several cases that could have perhaps been assessed better, but we absolutely desperately need the big picture. You know, for us not to have a seat at the table would be really insurmountable for us to improve our abilities to provide care too. I mean, we need to be there.
I will talk to Santa Clara Trauma Audit Committee, Santa Clara EMS, and ask if we can have a representative from our pre-hospital, not just me, but from you guys to be at that table.
So by all indications, TIDA's done a great job, but we want to be part of the development, the ongoing improvement, and be inclusive. I mean, this is the care that we provide. I mean, the pelvic binder stuff. Anybody in here? I've never put on a pelvic binder. I'm sure Jeff probably has.
Sure. Yeah, we do regularly.
Regularly? So, I mean, it's a great place for us to start. But having the ability to structure that as we move forward makes a huge difference in how we succeed.
For STEMI and stroke meetings, we had STEMI and stroke QI meetings scheduled for June 13th. They were canceled because we received notification from CHOP that they were no longer going to submit data to the EMS agency on these programs. Without data, we're not able to fully evaluate clinical systems. New stroke and STEMI regulations went into effect on July 1st. These regulations require all hospitals, whether you're a specialty center or not, to submit data to the EMS agency on at least a quarterly basis. So as a result of the new regs, I'm updating the stroke and STEMI policies, basically restating a lot of what's in the regs and including a standardized application and checklist for hospitals wishing to become a stroke or a STEMI center and the processes for designation and redesignation. The regs require that the EMS agency do a site visit on all of the programs at least every 3 years. So once I get all this done, I'll be scheduling those with the specialty centers. That's it.
Any other comments? Okay, thank you. Reports, and Jeff, do you want to give
More reports.
more reports?
So these are the reports for the communications readiness we report every meeting. These are through June. This is the 800 megahertz performance piece of it. Those are done daily. You can see, I think CHOMP and AMR are the ones that hit the 95% this month. I don't have any of the representatives, I think, other than just CHOMP. But there's continuing issues with the SBMH's radios. I know they're replacing them, but I don't have an update on that. And then the what's the other one?
Underneath.
Oh, there we go. And then the daily MCI drills that are done through ReadyNet. Overall, not too bad of a month for the MCI drills. I know Chomp, you guys do pretty good, so any feedback or comments on the drills?
No, we have a little iPad at our charge nurse desk, and so it goes off right there, right in front of them. So it's pretty easy. We've made it really easy for our charge nurse to answer it pretty early.
Okay.
I have a question. Natividad has traditionally done really well since we've been doing these drills, and I have noticed that they've fallen off. And they've been contacted to find out why, because that kind of surprised me.
I know Cassie's out. I did reach out to her, but I know she's out on leave for a while. I'll follow up with Chelsea and see if she has any information, but I haven't heard.
Because I provided beacon lights to the facility, but I don't know if they've been put in. I was a little concerned that once I gave them the beacon light, their numbers dropped off.
Yeah.
So I was kind of just from the side going, well, was that even an effective addition to the system?
I'll reach out to Chelsea and see if she has any
And
information.
then the other person that would be Cassie's counterpart is Jeffrey Hernandez.
Yeah, Jeffrey. Okay. Anybody have any questions on the drill? Oh, yeah.
Okay, fine. I think the numbers look good. I'm perpetual optimist, but I think this is where we need to be. It's good work.
Well, and just to let the group know, I did fund LiveNet for next year too, so starting in September will be our new contract with them. That's been fully funded for next year.
Future agenda items.
I propose that we get a full airway report for all airways, so we have the entire benchmark, because I think the critical skills essential to look at, but without the big picture, we're not getting all the data we need.
Second that.
I agree.
Just a more broad look at airway management in general, and the way of which endotracheal tube innovation is one part, one skill.
Anything else? Announcements.
We did mention it already. I just wanted to formally introduce Roxanne to the committee. She's with the Health Department EMS agency, and she's our new epidemiologist from the East Coast. So, welcome aboard.
Educational opportunities.
Again, we just have our burn care course coming up on August 9th, in collaboration with the Monterey Fire Department. This is going to be over at the fairgrounds, correct? 6 hours of CE. I think lunch is going to be provided as well. It's filling up. There's a few slots left. If anybody's interested, I believe the registration is on the county website.
It's on the web website?
Yeah, correct. Isn't that correct, Steve? The county website? What's the website? I believe it was posted there previously.
I had one. On July 25th, 2 weeks from tomorrow, the Healthcare Coalition is sponsoring a wildfire summit. It'll be an all-day event out at Laguna Seca. Unfortunately, I could not reserve the go-kart, so that is not part of the program. But we have our own Eric Dwelling here who's going to present. Hopefully Mr. Claridge is going to give us some updates. Got Kelly Coleman from CalENSA is going to come down and present on the new California Patient Movement plan. It's no charge. We will serve you lunch. I don't have all of this group on my distribution list, so I'll ask EMS to make sure that you get the flyer and the agenda. And then if there's any agency that would really like to present information, I've reached out to CAL FIRE to see if they would like to provide a table and information. But any agency that would like to set up a table that present information on their agency, I'd welcome their attendance also. So that'll be July 25th from 9 o'clock till 5. We're going to be showing a movie on wildfire and the effects of global warming on our, how much it's affecting wildfire. So really would appreciate your attendance, and you're welcome to come join us. Flyers on the table, but I'll make sure you get the information via email too.
You know, John, you shouldn't have said that because I received your voicemail yesterday. It says reach out to you, but now there's no cars to drive.
I'll come pick you up.
Drive your car,
I drive fast.
Yeah, I'm sorry about that. My budget just didn't allow it.
The line scooters.
Anything else under education?
Thank you.
Good of the order? Comment?
I got a brief comment. I know the wheels are in motion, and this is more just an informational piece than anything else. But there was a significant number of fire chiefs and fire leadership that went up to Sacramento yesterday in support of a Senate bill sponsored by Herzberg, Senate Bill 438, which is looking, it made it out of the Health Committee yesterday on a unanimous vote. It's going to go to appropriations, and it's going to go to a floor vote. And this is going to have dramatic implications for the 3,000 communications policies. I'm sure you're aware of it. Again, I think the right thing to do is to suspend implementation because this is on a fast track. We've spent a significant amount of public funds to have a document undone, and I just don't want to see that happen again.
Any other comments? Okay, I guess our next meeting will be September 11th, and there'll be some court that will sit in this seat probably trying to keep you guys entertained. I'll say a couple of things. 21 and a half years, and that doesn't include the 3 years I thought somebody else would take the job. You know, between 94 and 2000 before I did it, and I said, well, you know, I'm going to just concentrate on Slaney's Valley Memorial. Somebody else will do it, and nobody else seemed to want to do it. I've actually talked to 3 docs and pointed them in the direction for the EMS team here to interview. And as I see it, the medical director winds up being, as I was telling John before we met, a strange sort of conductor. So you need to know the clinical part or the EMS part, or I guarantee you, Dr. Galinsky and Dr. Click will eat you alive. So you got to know that. But the other thing is you need to be somebody that can talk to people. Otherwise, it doesn't matter what you know. Nobody's going to want you sitting in this seat, right? And then the third thing is, I guess every now and then you use command voice. You got to be able to conduct the meeting. And so there's this, this plethora of stuff, I guess, that makes up medical director. That's why it's not a whole bunch of us. But there are 3 folks in the pipeline, and they've been doing it a while. They got some experience, and I think that any one of them would be good for the job. So whoever it is, give them a chance. Times have changed. I did write a couple of notes in here. I wanted to thank everybody because we are a strange group. They make movies about what we do, and they have no idea what we do. It's a funny thing. We could probably all be retired if we just had one season on TV instead of 20 or 30 years out there for real. But it'd be pretty hard to have a party if none of you came, so thank you. I'll probably be doing some things with EMS at Me Memorial. I run a department down there, but it's you talk about minimum skills. I'm looking at minimum skills of physicians because I think it's important, and the department, because if you notice, many things get directed down from the field to our specialty hospitals, and not necessarily to a small hospital. And that's the direction that things are moving. Can you get to the right spot the first time rather than 2 or 3, 4 times later? I imagine I'll always have my hand in this until I'm just not doing emergency medicine anymore, and I hope that's a long time. I wanted to also share with you a couple of things. I think cooperation is key here. I see us kind of losing grasp of that because we're reaching for so many different, whatever it is. I mean, we all have our own focus, but I tell you, when I first took this job, I think you could be, you know, as long as you were a decent ED doc and you had a concern or a care, people were glad to have you. Today, people will tell you pretty quick, well, I've got a cousin in Florida, oh, you know, I got a brother in King County up in Washington, and they forget that we live here in Monterey, and we're trying to do the best we can here. That needs to be something, but we need to cooperate. So I've heard things like outcome data and stuff like that. Well, it's pretty hard to have outcome data if you don't have the cooperation from everybody involved to put the information in, okay? So don't lose that. I mean, a special note, don't lose that with each other. Work together and try and figure out, okay, I'll bring this piece, you bring this piece, and then let's just look at it and see where we're going, you know, and have a seat at the table. Don't forget to award yourself. We lost some traction with that. We went through a lot on this minimum skill stuff and what was signed off, what wasn't, and what was done. But people do a tremendous amount of work out there, and they need to be recognized. And it only happens if you come forward, let the agency know what you see people do that we don't necessarily see. So that's about it. See you
Dr.
around.
Stubblefield, I just had a question. When is the party?
I don't know, when's the party?
23rd, I think. We're gonna send it out now to finalize and stuff.
I think you deserve a party.
Okay.
And one other thing, I don't attend this meeting every time, but you bring up something on this recognition. Most times when I come here, there's no one being recognized. And I know our system has someone that can be recognized every month. So I think it's a great opportunity to do just what Dr. Stubblefield said, recognize our excellence within our county.
Yeah, I think it's important because, you know, it's pretty easy to criticize. It's pretty, seems to be seldom that we take the time to say, hey. So thanks, folks. We are adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank you for your service.
Thank you, Dr. Stubblefield.